All right. Welcome, 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 everyone. So grateful to be continuing to be able to offer this monthly channeling call and questions and answers call with the greater consciousness. I love the ability to come into connection and community with you all here as often as possible. And so I'm in deep gratitude for the opportunity to be able to do this. So as we get started, I want to remind you to please mute your mics if you haven't already. And for those who don't know me, my name is Amy White. I'm an intuitive medium. I'm a channel. I'm a truth bomb dropper. And I have been channeling the wisdom of the greater consciousness now for many years. And I'll get into the greater consciousness and who they are and how they're going to communicate with all of us today. But I first want to introduce you to Elizabeth Miner. Elizabeth is here on the call. Elizabeth, wave. And she's going to be assisting on the call today. So if there are issues or questions about the way that the broadcast is going, please feel free to message in the chat, and Elizabeth is going to be monitoring that. Elizabeth will also be letting other people in as they come into the session. Let me actually make sure you are co-host, Elizabeth. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And when we get through the channeling to the questions and answers portion of today's event, when we put the call out for questions, all you'll need to do is put a question mark in the chat box, and Elizabeth will help to facilitate the questions in the order in which they were received. So, and just to let you know, again, if you haven't been here, or if you've been here before, just a reminder that the questions can be related to the channeling, but they can also be anything that's on your heart and in your mind. That is your time to really touch in, one-on-one with the greater consciousness and ask the questions that maybe you've been seeking answers to and haven't quite been able to find that place where the answers exist. So the greater consciousness, for those who haven't heard, but this is also part of my process, so I want to make sure that I'm honoring them and their presence. The greater consciousness describes themselves as all of the wisdom that ever was, all of the wisdom that will ever be, and all of the wisdom that's here right now in this time and space in every living being. And so, in essence, they are representative of the infinite wisdom that exists within each of us. And so, one of the things that they channeled through me not long ago was a little bit of a deeper definition of how the greater consciousness really works through me and interacts with each person individually and collectively in a group setting like this. And what they said was that the greater consciousness connects with your unique wisdom and the unique wisdom of the collective. Um, they help to put words to feelings, they help to validate inner knowing, and they open up the door to possibilities that we may not have yet considered. And I really love that. So beautiful to connect with the understanding that the greater consciousness doesn't present themselves as this higher being that has all the answers. The greater consciousness says, we are all part of the whole. We are all part of this conscious collective. And so the wisdom really is within each of us. And being able to connect through me to that wisdom and then bring it forward in words that you can understand becomes such a beautiful gift, not just for the way that you're hearing it, especially if it's a message specifically for you, but how the messages often come through in a way that applies to so many, not just the not just the questioner or not just the topic of conversation. Um, the way that I channel, it differs almost every single time I do a channeling. Very often, I am the interpreter of the greater consciousness wisdom, and often in the dance, they will channel directly through me. One of the things that has been happening a lot lately is this, it's almost this very small shift between the two. And I believe that that's more and more of the way that they're needing and wanting to communicate the messages out. So it'll be interesting for me, and I'm sure for all of you, to see and witness and experience how the greater consciousness comes through me as a channel. So we're going to go for about 30, 40 minutes today. I'm going to let the greater consciousness say what they need to say or want to say. And then we'll open up to questions. During our last call, there were so many questions, which was really beautiful. I'd like to make sure that there's enough time and space for questions that you may have, or questions that come up as we go through the channeling. So I'm going to be watching the time, and probably about 4:45-ish will 5 Pacific time. Um, I will be I will be moving to questions, but we will see how that flows, because very often it really is dependent on so many factors. All right, I'm going to take just a moment to get a little bit more grounded. And, as part of my human process, there are times when things are a little bit more stressful than others, and I have to just ask for the support to move my human experience aside so that I can be as clear a channel for this as possible. So I'm taking just a few extra moments here to do that. So, the topic of today's call that was channeled through to me was a question that the greater consciousness was asking of us as a collective, of what are we exploring? What are you exploring? And as I was tapping into this question deeper and deeper over the last week or so, I was asking for specific information around this exploration, because so often we've talked over the past 7 or 8 months of this call that this pandemic time, this COVID time, has been such an offering, such a gift of pause. And the pause has been used by so many of us as a way to go deeper and to explore our inner landscape. And so, as the greater consciousness was bringing forward this topic, this question, I was feeling in my interpretation initially that they were asking us to do even more exploration internally, even deeper excavation of our inner knowing and our beliefs. And the interesting part of this was that what came back from the greater consciousness was, no, this isn't about exploring the inner landscape, though that's really important. And it's an ongoing, important process for us each to do as we're moving through our own personal journeys. But what they were talking about in this case, and what they wanted to bring forward on today's call, was the idea, and the opening to the possibility that we can begin to explore the world around us again. Now, this can feel scary to some people, and I want to be very thoughtful in the way, and the greater consciousness wants to be very thoughtful in the way that this information and message is coming through, because they're not saying throw caution to the wind and go out and live life the way you did prior to the pandemic. They're not saying that at all. And I want to be really clear, and they want to be really clear about that. But what they are saying is that the invitation to each of you over the last several calls, if you've been here, has been to start to look at taking personal responsibility for your journey, tapping into and aligning with each decision that you make, each challenge that you're faced with, each choice that you're contemplating, and really decide from the standpoint only of what your soul is asking for from you to determine, is this in my highest good? Is this choice or decision or movement forward or pause the right decision for me? And when we use the word right, we're not using it as right and wrong. It really is about, is this the aligned decision, aligned choice, aligned movement forward for me, regardless of what input you may be receiving from the outer world, whether it's a well intended friend or loved one, or what you're hearing and reading in social media. The most important thing that you can do for yourself, especially in this time and space, is to continue to form this deeper and deeper relationship with that alignment. But when you are practicing that alignment, it's like you can take the next step and you can take the next step. And so as you come into the alignment with yourself and you start to ask and discern what is in the highest for you, then the next step is to take that practice out into the world. And so, what the invitation here is to begin to practice that alignment about more and more external movement. And the reason why this is so important is because we are both energetic and physical beings. And we came here on this planet at this time during this transformation for the purpose of participation. And we participate through the connecting to our inner knowing and through the aligning with what is right for us. And as we move about the world, we ripple out to the collective this alignment, this connection, this high vibration energy. And so, again, we're not asking you to step outside and go do the things you once did. But we are asking you to be open to the possibility that you can take that next baby step and that next baby step and that next baby step to start to find ways to move about the world while mitigating the risks that you feel you need to mitigate. And that comes from that internal knowing, that comes from that internal connection. Movement and moving your energy through the world right now is very important. We want you to know that we this is for the interpretation of each one of you. This guidance, this supportive information is for you to decide in what way, shape, or form you feel aligned to do it. But it's time now. It's time now to start that movement. It can be slow and purposeful and, granny shuffle after granny shuffle after granny shuffle, but this is the time. And we understand that it can feel very contradictory to the information that's out there or to what we're witnessing in the world around us. There's so much that is shutting down again. There's so many areas where you may feel that things are tightening and tightening and tightening. And so it can feel very, conflicting and like a contradiction to be saying, be hearing, to be thinking or contemplating this forward movement. And yet there is so much importance, so much reason, so much value in each one of us taking the steps to start to move forward. What's the greater consciousness is saying that it's so important to understand that in a way we're being called to show up in the world differently than we've been called to show up before. And what that means is that we are being called to show up in a deeper authentic connection than ever before, than we've even some of us have even ever contemplated. And how that looks and feels is going to be different, but that that knowing, that connection into the inner knowing that's here for each of us is so absolutely important. And when we can tune in and tap into that, each one of us, we're able to get a very clear path. It's an illuminated path on how we start to move about the planet. It's this movement is so much more than just a reopening of the life that we were once living, the life that we felt we were once living. This opening is the pathway to the deeper consciousness awakening that's happening on this planet. Each one of us here on this call today and who's listening in replay, who has chosen to be here for this message, for this information, for this guidance, has been called here for the purpose of understanding the next steps and the next steps and the next steps. So many have felt stuck for so long. And this is the, for lack of better words, permission to begin to assess and evaluate and take those steps forward. The world needs to feel the energy of opening, and each one of us has the ability to bring that energy out into the world. Again, in any way that feels safe, in any way that feels you can mitigate the risk that you believe is there. And we're not saying that there isn't risk. We're saying that each one will mitigate the risk differently. Why is this so important? It is so important because the energy of transformation, the energy of this transmutation that's happening on your planet is coming to a peak. It's coming to an energetic peak for this chapter. It's coming to an energetic peak for those especially who have awakening and who are awake to the information. But the balance that you're being asked to provide is is bigger than simply taking some steps forward. It is a grounding, stabilizing, and foundational act of love and service for humanity. And we know that this can sound a little bit big or overwhelming, or even can even cause frustration or resistance. Because as a collective, we have not come to this conversation with you all before. We've not given such specific instructions to what is needed and necessary here now in this time and space for the greater good of humanity, for the greater good of the planet, for the greater good of the awakening of the consciousness. There is a big shift coming. There are many big shifts coming, but there is a big shift coming in the very near future for all that's here for the collective. And it will, as we've said before, impact each individual differently, depending on where the focus is, depending on where the starting point is, depending on where the belief systems are. And none of it is wrong or bad or judge worthy. None of it is a criticism. But what comes from the beautiful menagerie of many different focuses and many different attentions and many different belief systems is that the energy, when it peaks, can really rattle things up. And so it's important for you to understand that as the shift is coming, the more and more you can stand in your truth, and the more and more you can connect in to your inner knowing, and the more you can give yourself permission to move about the world in new and different ways, the better suited you will be to ride the waves of the ebbs and flows and the shifts and the shocks and the coming together and the coming apart. That is all part of the transformation that's happening today in the world for you, and what will be happening for some time in the future. Movement about the planet. We cannot say it strongly enough. We cannot communicate this to you in words that are stronger than this. And we want you to understand that this is not about creating fear or the need for you to take some very specific action to align yourself to go into battle or to go into the mode of healer or to go into anything. We're asking, we're guiding, we're providing information for you to understand that this movement is your next step in evolution. It's your next step in awakening. It's your next step in coming into alignment. And that is the message for you today. The inner landscape, the inner exploration is equally as important, but isn't the movement that is bolstering the collective. It is the movement that is allowing you each to come into alignment with your inner knowing, with your inner being, to hear the soul's calling, to hear the intuition, to see the signs and symbols that are there for you. But this outer movement, we're going to keep repeating it over and over today because this outer movement is so important. It's so important for you. It's so important for where you are going as a collective. And it is the way forward. We want to let you know that as things begin to energetically increase, there isn't any need to focus on the outer situations in a way that allows for the losing focus of the connection that you have within you. And what we mean by this is that there are many opportunities, as there have been many opportunities during this year, for you to get pulled out of your alignment by what's happening on the outside. And as you have felt yourself being pulled out of alignment, so many have come back into alignment faster and faster and easier each time it happens. And so the guidance here and the awareness that we want you to have in your being is that as the energy ramps up, the external world, the external situations and circumstances are also going to appear to ramp up. And yet, you do not have to go and live in that outer world in a way that disconnects you from your inner world. So there's a balance here. There's a dance here that we're wanting you to be aware of, because we're also not asking you to deny anything that's happening on the outside of your inner knowing. We want you to hold the space of all of it, but we don't want you to go there and stay there to the point where you can no longer touch into the place that you have been fostering and nurturing, that loving, deep wisdom that's within you. So the intention is to be very aware of what is likely to start showing up even more and more around you, and to set the intention while the waters are somewhat still to continue to come back, to continue to come back to the space of grounding, to touch into that alignment, and to really start to use your personal responsibility, your personal connection into your authenticity to discern, is this information? Is this something that I need to be putting my focus and attention on? Is this something that impacts me? Am I being called to take action? All of these questions can be used as a way to discern what part and how much do you focus and invest in what's happening outside of you. Now, we know this sounds a little wobbly because we started this conversation with wanting you to move outside and yet be connected inward. And this really is the complement to what we were saying earlier, because it's multidimensional, it's multi-level here. We can walk in the world in these physical vehicles that we've selected to come here to live through. We can be in that physicality and connected in and checking in and tapping into that alignment while the world is moving around us. And we can do all of those things at the same time. That's the invitation, to find that balance of in inner and outer, and checking and balancing and moving about the world, carrying what's happening externally like a loose blanket around you, not a straitjacket, not a cocoon, not a swaddling blanket, but an actual, loosely, so that you're not holding on to any aspect of what isn't for you, what doesn't resonate for you, what doesn't really impact you, because you're where you are in your grounding. You can allow the information, the situations, the opinions to pass through much easier than you ever have in the past. We don't very often come here with such deep and specific information about the shifting that's coming. We've actually been not focused with you on the shift for some time, but it is important now in this time and space to understand and realize that the shifting is here in a deeper and greater and more magical way. This is not bad in the human definition. This is awakening. It is birthing of new. It is coming out of the ashes of what was old for each of us individually and for the collective. Coming out of the ashes to create the next version of the life that we are here to live. It's very, we use the word important a lot in this call today, but it's very important to understand and to find that balance for you so that as things ebb and flow, you are riding out the waves, riding the waves, floating in the waves, allowing the waves to carry you where they will, knowing that it's all in perfect divine order. We want you to know because as humans, sometimes it's hard to remember that there are energies all around us, all around the planet, that are involved in the creation of the new. They are orchestrating at levels that you cannot see the way that the world is going to rebirth itself. The focus for you all, as best you can, on the positives that are there now, while not denying any feelings that you may have about what's happening around you. But the focus on the positives allows for your energy to stay aligned in a deeper and deeper way. It's it's very palpable, this energy that's coming, this energy that's here. You'll each feel it. You'll each be part of it. And you each get to choose how you want to show up within your own experience to be a participant in what's coming next. This is a big invitation. And as we said earlier, the practice of coming into alignment and discerning what pieces and parts are the best for you and your highest good for you, that's the next steps. That's the next practice. Where can I create movement? Where can I create connection? Where can I create grounding? Taking that in your own personal experience and then out into the planet is one of the greatest gifts you can bring forward right now. We would consider it a gift of service. We would also consider it a path to deeper evolution for each one of you and for the collective. It is a powerful and magical and soul expanding time that we're here experiencing now and that's coming in the future. There is nothing wrong here. Nothing is going wrong here. We'd like to take questions. If there is a question that you'd like to ask, go ahead and put a question mark in the chat box, and Elizabeth will help to facilitate. While we're waiting, I did have a question from a write-in from someone who couldn't be on the call today. I'm just taking a minute to come back fuller. The question was, with everything going on in the world, I've felt the pull to start to explore again, but I'm concerned about being judged by others. How can I best come into alignment and feel confident that I can follow my internal compass without feeling as though I'm going to be judged? That's a really powerful question. The most important thing that you can do is to, as the greater consciousness has been communicating on today's call, to tune into your inner knowing. If something feels right to you and you can come into alignment with it, then that's an indication that it's the right next step for you. The judgment piece, especially now, is a harder piece perhaps to feel that you can overcome. But the practice here is to know that regardless of what anyone else thinks about you or your choices or what you're doing, that when you are making decisions from the place of alignment with your inner knowing, you are making the highest and best decision for you. And this is where trust comes in. Trust is the space of connecting that knowing to the ability to do what you feel you're being guided to do, what you feel your soul is calling you to do. And trust is a practice just like all of this. And in many belief systems, and I'll speak directly to the person who wrote in this question, there are belief systems that you hold around being judged by others. And this is not a judgment on the stance of the greater consciousness. This is an awareness that there somewhere in your past were stories that were handed to you that you believed were connected to your value and your worth. And what other people thought of you was more important than you following your guidance. Often we'll call people, people pleasers will be what people will be called who have these belief systems. So often sacrificing their selves for what they think is going to make everyone else happy. We've called this a number of times, it's like self-harm through service or self-harm through people-pleasing. Because each time that you're making choices that is coming from a place of being concerned about how everyone else around you is going to feel, how everyone around you is going to react, then you might make, at least for a brief moment in time, the people around you satisfied or happy. But when you are disregarding your needs for the needs of others, there's an element of self-harm there. And so we really want you to sit with and take into consideration the opportunities that you're having right now to practice this alignment, this listening to your soul pull, and this moving out into the world in a way that trusts your movement and doesn't put so much attention or emphasis or power on what other people may or may not be thinking or may not be judging about the choices that you're making. This is not easy, and it's not, you know, mm, the word always a smooth path, but it is a path that is so absolutely there illuminated for you. And so, as you are listening to this answer on replay, the invitation is for you to start to set the intention that you will practice this a little bit, a little bit, a little bit at a time. There is no need for you to make a big, bold move now. But as you begin to practice this awareness and this intention, you will find it gets easier and easier to move about the world in the way that feels best to you, not really focusing on how other people react or respond to it. And that is true alignment. So hopefully that answers the question. Thank you so much.
Amy, we have another question in the chat box, and I'm just going to read it because I'm just going to read it. And if the person wants to chime in at any time, they can unmute themselves. The comment is, I feel overwhelmed with the things I'm dealing with, even though the outside world is less active with COVID-19. I'm wondering, what does this overwhelm mean? How do I know what is in my highest good while feeling overwhelmed? Kind of relates to a little bit of what you were just talking about.
Yeah. The, overwhelm is I'm sorry, how did I get muted?
That was my fault, sorry.
Oh, the overwhelm is a big indicator to help us to see where we are feeling that pull of not being in alignment. This has a lot to do with trust. This has a lot to do with being able to come into connection with your knowing. And yes, from a physical perspective, when you're in overwhelm, it is very difficult to hear the calling of the soul, the inner wisdom that's there, but it's not impossible. And it takes some intentionality. The and there's nothing wrong with being in overwhelm. These are overwhelming times for many. But the question here is part of your soul's desire to find a way to come into more balance so that you feel less overwhelmed and you can connect deeper into your knowing. There's a practice that helps to start this process. And it's 3 simple steps that you can take every day, and sometimes multiple times during the day if that's what feels in alignment for you. But to start in the morning when you wake up and simply take 5 to 7 deep breaths as you're coming back into your physical body from your sleep. 5 deep belly breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Taking the time to connect in with your breath first thing in the morning before anything else comes into your experience is a really loving way to start the day. The second part of the process is to roll out of bed when you're ready. Doesn't have to be on the heels of the 5 to 7 breaths. And put your feet on the floor and be there, connected to the floor, feeling your feet under you, and really drop a pin in your physical presence of this is where I am right now. And stay there as long as it feels good to you. Usually, just a couple of minutes is all it takes to really connect into the physical place that you are in your body in that moment. And then the third thing that I'm recommending for you as a way to practice this coming into deeper alignment and finding peace in the overwhelm is to use the mantra in this moment, all is well. And as you feel your anxiety or your overwhelm creeping in, using that mantra in the moment just puts a pause on the overwhelm. It puts a pause on the anxiety, and it allows you to have a little bit of a reset. Now, you may need to string a number of those mantras together, uh, day in and day out as you're moving through this time and space, but it will begin to shift for you. Just by doing these three simple practices, you will find in a very short period of time that the overwhelm feels less and less. Give yourself the time and the space to practice this, and the wisdom of your inner knowing, the calling of your soul, the guidance that you need and want to hear will start to come through in louder and stronger and more hearable ways and more discernible ways. It doesn't all have to be right now like a switch flip. It really is about taking time to love on the place within you that's feeling overwhelmed right now, that's feeling a little scared, that's feeling a little uncertain, or a lot scared, or a lot uncertain. And knowing that with practice, with time, with self love, with this nurturing practice, that it will shift and you will start to feel the the way forward for you. I hope that answers the question. If there's more, feel free to tap and type in the box.
Thank you. It does. I was going to ask for a practice to for me to do, and it's answered.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you.
And Amy, Shannon says, first and foremost, thank you. But do you have any messages or feelings regarding contacting our ancestors at this time of year when the veil between us is as thin as it will be?
Yes, this is a really beautiful time of year for each one of us to come into closer contact with our ancestors, um, specifically our ancestors this time of year, but any time of year is a good time to connect in with our ancestors. It's really interesting. The greater consciousness brought into my awareness the fact that over the last week or so, as I've been moving about the planet, moving about my area here, that very often I see in the corner of my eye someone standing near me. So I know that the veil is very, very thin. Um, the 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 thing about any time that we want to work with our ancestors, and it sounds like the question is very specific to ancestors. So if it's broader than that, as far as connecting into loved ones that's crossed over, we can shift the question, but it feels very much about the ancestors and the intentionality that we enter into this connection with is so important. The idea, the thought, the desire to both understand our ancestral uh, lineage, to understand the packages that have been passed from generation to generation that have stopped at you or have landed with you, is important. It's important to sort through the intention behind what you are looking to accomplish with the connection, because there is the opportunity for great healing when we connect into our ancestors. And there is an opportunity for still great healing, but also sort of a stirring of the pot, for lack of better terms. So it's really important to know and feel into the intention for connecting in. For you specifically, it feels like there is, and it often is, a very deep connection with your ancestors. I feel like there's a line of women, and surprisingly, not on your mother's side, but on your father's side, that is like so connected energetically, like not just not just a thread of DNA between them, but like a pipe of connection. And it's very much they are powerful energies. They are strong energies. They are energies that have lived very challenging experiences and yet still found a way, either in their physical body or as they were transitioning, to really understand how powerful their influence is. Does this making sense to you?
Yes, yeah.
Because there's yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. Yeah, I recently connected with my paternal grandmother in ceremony in a very strong way.
Yes.
I'm open to it being a broader question. Just in my head, it was more focused with, Dia de los Muertos and spiral
Yeah.
dance and all these different cultures, at this time of year celebrating your
Yeah.
ancestors.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful time for the celebration of the ancestors. And what was sort of the messaging at the beginning is that at any time you choose to connect in from a personal, deeper understanding perspective, that the time is always right. But this time of year, the celebration, the ritual, the ceremony around that activity, for you especially, feels very powerful and very potent and very uh, like there's a cauldron of just
Being
gorgeous.
stirred.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, for you, what you're feeling is spot on as far as the veil that's opening, but also the invitation. And the reason why they keep coming back to this anytime is that you've done, and it's and connecting with your paternal grandmother, but also in the things that you've already done in the past to understand and connect in energetically to your ancestral lineage, so that you can better understand who you are and what you're here for, not just the chains you're here to break, but also the energy that you're here to bring forward and move forward and pass forward. So don't just limit your time of connection to this time. Um, it is a beautiful way to remember and honor and tap into, but especially for you, this is a longer uh, unraveling and longer unfolding.
Mhm.
And it's really, so what's coming through, not just from an energetic perspective, but there's some really beautiful stories within your family line, especially the women on your father's side, that if you have the connection into any type of, and this is like a really practical thing, but this is what they're saying, any type of ancestor records, that type of thing, there are some stories in the past that will both inspire you and also explain some more about who you are and why you're here and what you're bringing, what you're like, the torch that you're being asked to carry forward. Um, It's a little witchy, and but it's a lot magic, and witchy's magic too, but it's both. Like it's really beautiful. So if you have the opportunity or the resources to do that, there's some good stuff that's going to answer a lot of your questions there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Are there any other questions? Any other shares? One of the questions that I have for you all here today is that, even as the channeling was happening today, there was this feeling of it being such a powerful message that is one different than the greater consciousness has shared before, because they really were speaking to this time and space reality and what's coming. And I know that can be both anxiety provoking for some, exciting for some, but I would love to hear if it stirred up some knowing within you as they were communicating sort of this next big piece of the awakening. If
I think
anybody,
we need to be in this world differently.
yeah,
Kind of this.
yeah, yep.
We've all
Yeah.
been sent to our rooms to think about what we've done.
But not in a punishment way, very much in a way of reset and reassessment, so that we can show up in the world in a way that's much more, powerful is the word that keeps coming through, but I think that's what's going to be needed and necessary for us and for the collective. Yeah, powerful. Yeah. And I do think that in some ways, as a collective, we were sent to our rooms to to look, because we couldn't get from where we were to where we needed to be without this bridge that was created by the pandemic. Yeah. Powerful.
Amy, hello.
Yes.
Girl.
Hello.
Hello. So last time I was here, second to last time I was here, I think the greater consciousness said that I would intuit my own ways of figuring out pain, physical pain of the emotion.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that happened.
Oh.
Like in what you said, what was it? Oh my God, my heart just started beating. You said how like the greater consciousness is now like giving like more specific instructions.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like what I have gotten out of this process of quarantine was my interpretation of all of this is my I am consciousness and ascended masters is who I seem to be tapping into.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I'm like, who's telling me this stuff? And I'm like, oh, it's my I am. And so like, that's how I have it now. And
Yeah.
so I took that break because I was like, oh my God, like I need to focus on like what I'm getting and not hear anybody
Yeah.
else.
Yes.
And so I have a friend who trans channels. And so I can just talk to whoever it is, like, in that moment. And so we channeled my high self, and my high self was like, you need to get organized. So I got organized, and then I got more instructions on how to actually execute stuff for marketing, for like the tangible. And, like number one, like, thank you so much. Like, I did not believe you when the greater consciousness said I would intuit something on my own. And then also just like to share and encourage everyone, like we're here building the new earth. Like it's all very tangible. And the more that we're open, the more like we just get guided. Like I never thought I would ever hear myself saying this stuff, but it's like moment by moment. Yeah. You're absolutely guided. Like I've never felt so alive and full in my entire life.
Yeah. That's ever. Magic.
Yeah.
That's magic.
Yeah. So like, it's all in like, not that you needed confirmation, but it was like, yeah, like everything that like they're saying, like it's the same.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, well, it's, I mean, confirmation is fabulous, but I also love to see how things unfold after a session or not so much for my ego's desire to be like, "Ooh, I called that," but because it's so exciting to be able to see what's coming in
Mhm.
my mind's eye translated into words, and then to be able to then see it in a tangible manifestation is really powerful. Right? It's so beautiful. And I love that. And it's funny because what I heard when you were just talking was you did believe it. You did. You weren't sure you wanted to believe it, or you weren't sure that you were ready to believe it, but there was parts of you that definitely did believe it, or you wouldn't have heard and followed the guidance.
Well, yes. And then there is one other thing, like a downside to this, I guess, a little bit, just to share if people start, if you're in the middle of this. So like a month ago, I went to a health food store with a friend who's into astrology, or he works there, he's into astrology. And I eventually just burst out into tears. And I said, I made a spiritual commitment and now I have to follow through. And my body wasn't able to keep up. Like I was totally getting burnt out. Like I was exhausted
Yeah.
all the time. And so like that was a month ago. And so I got a thyroid supplement that I take 3 times a day that's natural, and a vitamin pack, because he was like, even though you're like in high frequency, you're still stressing your body as
Mhm.
if you were in low frequency. It's the still same adrenal gland reaction. And so just for like anybody who's like starting to experiencing the ascension symptoms, like big time, like it was just supplements, and it was like
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful. It's one of the things that we often forget, especially when we're really like moving on the path, is that the soul doesn't have any limitations, but our physical body does. And so it's always about that balance of making sure that as we're working on, our path, our awakening, our coming into deeper alignment, that we're also being able to say in partnership with our inner knowing, hey, help me to understand the things that I need from a physical perspective so that I can continue to move forward. Because there is, we can burn ourselves out, and it feels good in the moment sometimes when we're just in that flow, in that flow, in that flow. But we have to remember that we are physical, we have physical vehicles, these physical bodies that we have to take care of as we're moving through our process. So that's beautiful. And look at something simple as a supplement, and now you're able to feel like you're in more connection and alignment with your physical and energetic being. So beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Are there other questions? You're muted.
I was reading the question that somebody posted. I was like, oh, good.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's one other here. And what can one do to keep better connected to their empathic energy?
Mm. So I'm just I think if I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the question, so you can tell me in chat if you don't feel like coming on um, uh, live. The When I hear empathic energy, what I feel is that that's the same as coming into connection with your inner knowing, with that inner wisdom. It's because it's all of it. It's the feeling energy, it's the knowing energy, it's the hearing energy, it's all of it. And so I guess yes. Okay, great. So what I have found and what I've been guided is that the coming into deeper and deeper connection with that energy has to do with the way that we start to form a partnership with that part of us. I feel that, and the feeling is that this soul part is such a big energy around and within you, but we often look at our soul energy and our human energy as two different things. We often hold the physical experience separate from the soul experience. And so it really is in the bringing together and the acknowledging that human experience and the soul experience, and then loving on that whole part of you. And it sounds really simple when it's said out loud, but it is that touching in to the human pieces of you that really need extra love. And the more you love on those parts of you, the more you love on the scared little girl, the distrusting teenager, the confused, early adult. Like the more you love on those parts of you that really doesn't need to be healed or fixed, that just needs to be acknowledged and held, the more you do that, the more you stay connected with that inner wisdom, that inner soul, that inner knowing, that empathic knowing that is you. It's not one or the other. It's both. It's that acknowledging and the coming into connection, that loving on, that asking those parts of you what they need, how you can support them, how you can love them, how you can start to build that trust, that partnership with them, and the connectedness to your energy just grows and grows and grows from there. So a simple practice in your daily meditation or in whatever way that you come into connection with yourself, with your soul, with source, is to put when you're able to get into a place of meditation or silence, to then ask the questions: what do I need to know about the places in me that need extra love? And see what comes up in your mind, because as what pops into your mind, the first thing that pops into your mind is the place to start. And then make that a practice of every time that you think about it or feel inspired to ask, show me the place that needs a little extra love and nurturing and nourishing. It can not, it may, and from a human perspective, feel hard or sad or painful in the moment, but that's the indicator that shows you where that loving is needed, where that embracing is needed. And from there, the energetic connection just will fine tune and fine tune and fine tune. Does that answer the question? Thanks. Thank you. That was just an excellent question, because in some ways it's the starting point for all of this, right? It's the starting point. So when we are able to find the way that works for us, each one of us individually, to come into that deeper connection, to love on us in the places that need love, to celebrate the places where we can see how the evolution has taken place, and continue to turn that attention inward and inward and inward, the more and more we'll be able to hear and see and listen and smell and taste the guidance. It's just magical and beautiful. So good. So good. Oh, Ryan, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions or comments, I just want to take a moment and thank you each from my heart and soul for being part of this community, for sharing your wisdom, your energy, your questions, and for allowing the greater consciousness to share the information that's so on they're putting on my heart and in my mind to share through. So as we move through this next month, I encourage you to find the quiet points of the day where you can really connect in, where you can really test out what's working for you, what is for you, what's right for you, what's aligned for you, and what isn't. And start to put into practice as best as you can, as best as feels highest and in the highest and good for you, to start some forward movement, forward motion around and about and out into the world. Thank you all so much for being here. I love you. I love you. I love you. The greater consciousness loves you, loves you, loves you. And I'm hoping to do this again next month. So watch your inboxes for the invitation.
Thanks.
Big love. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.